Hello, one concurrent viewer who came so quickly. I've been busy in my Telegram group. I've got, 23 days before I'm out of Facebook jail. So I have to do something else. And it's not been too bad. I've been talking to different people and actually being able to deal with their questions on secular Quranism. As I predicted, there will be, some basic fundamental misunderstandings of my position. There's a Muslim who seems to think that I want to stone people. And I suppose, well, I'm off Facebook, it's worth clearing up a few misunderstandings. And of course, Michael E. Jones also has his own Telegram group, but the toxic racist insults are something to behold, really very nasty, really very crude, and this is something that he associates himself with these days. So, I mean, I wouldn't allow it in my group, but yes, he's happy to do that sort of thing, and I think there may be a danger with Telegram. You think, it's all your territory, you can do what the hell you like. But there will be people watching, there will be, your competitors joining to see what goes on, and I'm sure there will be spies seeing what kind of thing your supporter says. And the kind of thing that E. Michael Jones's supporters say are very unpleasant indeed, very crude, very nasty, very lower class, and he doesn't seem to care or doesn't seem to notice. But it reminded me of this promise he made to me years ago when he first appeared on my channel, which is that if he thought Islam was the answer, he would convert to Islam. Unfortunately, he won't talk to me now. He doesn't want to talk to me because he doesn't think I can persuade him of... He doesn't think he can persuade me of the truth of Catholicism, because it's not just a matter of persuading me to believe in God, but to persuade me that Jesus is God, which is an absurdity, which is obviously the explanation of why Christianity is a dead duck. And it astounds me how so many Westerners don't get what the American, French and Russian revolutions were about. They were rejections of Christianity and monarchy. But they still don't get it. Well, I say it whenever possible, whenever I am given the opportunity of doing so, in my Telegram group, which you may wish to join. It's somewhere for me to go when I'm off Facebook. And it's somewhere where you may wish to find me. The other problem is the fact that people just don't care about, they lie all the time. They lie to themselves, they lie to each other, but what happens when you lie to other people compulsively, habitually, is that you will end up lying to yourselves, and you will end up believing in your own propaganda, and your own propaganda is, well, rubbish. It's not true. It can't work. But you don't care as long as nothing physically bad happens to you. But it's only a matter of time before it does. So I'm not downhearted that nobody seems to get what I'm saying. I know that they are neurotic, They are in denial. They can't engage in a discussion about what's gone wrong. They have to blame the Jews. They have to blame somebody. It's everyone. Everyone else but themselves. Mistakes were made, but not by them. But the solution remains a simple one. If you accept that your religion has failed, then it just becomes so easy. It's like, well, do we need to replace it or not? And it will become obvious to you that no society, nation, has existed without a moral system, because everybody has laws, and these laws have to be based on a moral system of, well, something, either following God's laws, promoting the national interest, supporting liberalism, or conservatism, or Nazism, or communism, or any of those isms. And that's what you base your laws on. So currently, we don't know in the West what our moral system is. It's not liberalism. It's not conservatism. Is it fascism? Or communism? Or socialism? What is it? Nobody wants to ask. Nobody even thinks to ask what the hell it is. Well, they want to talk about race because they're so intellectually compromised that they can only think in terms of colour. I'm saying it's not really about race. It's about your ability to organise against your internal and external enemies, and you can't do that because you live in a matriarchy, and a matriarchy is a society that makes all men lower in status than the unmarried mother. And this means that men have to pander to the preferences of unmarried mothers, and when they do that, they will feminize themselves and infantilize themselves, because they think, well, we're no longer in charge than somebody else. Somebody else must be looking after us. And actually, nobody's looking after them. Nobody is looking after anyone. Nobody is minding the shop. In the meantime, gender relations worsen, and your degeneracy increases, because then you're no longer capable of organising yourselves. You're not capable of having any conversation about anything that affects the future of your country. So when I was in E. Michael Jones's Telegram group, I was reminded of the fact that he said to me in 2017 that he would convert to Islam if he thought that was the answer. But then, if he won't talk to me about why you think Islam is not the answer, then he's clearly not a man of integrity and lies to himself. So I remember from the conversations, the two videos I spoke to him on. He said Iran was not doing that well. But why does it matter? Iran is a sovereign state. It can defy the might of America and its allies. It can do things that other countries can't. What about the Sunni Muslim countries? They are all subject to the might of America and its allies. So while the Sunnis think they're better than the Shias, it's actually the Shias who who made the most of Islam and turned their country into a republic. And this is particularly important in view of the threat to the British monarchy. And I'm saying that the more I think about it, the more it becomes obvious that you can't really afford to keep an anachronism, because it is analogous to keeping your boiler when you know it no longer works. You need to remove it and replace it with one that works. And the difficulty about yes. So, where was I? Oh, all these messages, all these posts in the chat. What was I saying? I've forgotten what I was saying. Sorry about that. It was something about the British monarchy, that was an anachronism, and you can't afford to keep it hanging around, taking up space, when you should be taking it out and making space for the new one that would work. That's what I'm saying. And E. Michael Jones, for reasons best known to himself, cannot accept that Catholicism failed a long time ago. And yes, it brings me to the subject that I did want to talk about, which is Protestantism. And Protestantism is actually a very natural consequence of European nations reaching maturity and thinking that they're not going to be told by a pope who was obviously mortal and fallible what they could and couldn't do, and who they could and couldn't marry. And that was basically what Henry VIII decided. Now, I'm interested in nationalism because, well, I see nothing wrong in promoting a political ideology that is about promoting the national interest, because actually the Bible and the Quran acknowledge the existence of nations, and both say that nations should follow God's laws. So at least, the Bible acknowledges the existence of nations, even if not the American empire, who thinks that everywhere is its backyard, including Britain. So, a prince of Britain could be having sex with a 17-year-old, and it's not even a crime in the UK, but, the Americans are saying, well, it's a crime if you had sex with one of our women, because she's... what? Because she would have been considered underage in America, but she wasn't considered underage in the UK. But it seems the Americans still want to get a British prince, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be, because, well, the legal system is rigged, and basically the matriarchy have it in for the men, which is why you get this situation where the word of a retired prostitute is capable of convicting, under trial by media anyway, a prince who denies having had sex with her, even though he claims he had an alibi. It can't be proven, but, just because he was photographed with this woman means that he must have had sex with her. So, well, anyone who has had any legal training would see how ridiculous and outrageous this whole thing is, but it's allowed to proceed because America wishes it. And Americans are not in a good place at the moment because something has happened. They hate their president, their current president. They do not have confidence in. And in the previous president, at least, well, his supporters at least had confidence in him. It is not known how many real supporters Biden has, since he barely makes sense. And America seems to be bent on starting a war in Ukraine. So we don't know what's going on. It just doesn't make sense at any level. It's like, well, if you have people at home who hate you, you shouldn't really be trying to start any war somewhere else, because you're not going to get support for it. And what's going to happen is that you're going to get economic collapse, rebellion, rioting, and regime change. So if I were an evil American plutocrat, I wouldn't be taking my chances in these big precarious times. But it seems to me that America is like a belligerent drunk, wending and weaving his way to, well, we don't know where. He seems to be not going home, and he may fall over any moment. Either because somebody doesn't like the look of him and decides that they might give him a punch because they don't like drunks being drunk and disorderly, walking around shouting and singing in the middle of the night, or he may just trip over his own feet and come crashing down on the pavement. What should the rest of the Western world do? They must surely be thinking of what is to happen if something terrible happens in America, when its people are, well, they're not very happy. Even social media is divided. I think it's crazy to make all the Trump supporters go into one particular group and not be able to go on the big ones because the big social media platforms don't like them. Well, if you want to keep an eye on people, you don't really get. Well, it's a many stage process, isn't it? You want to go to one social media platform, and then you have to go to another. It's a lot of time. You want them all on one, and so you can spy on them all at the same time, right? But worse than this is the sheer inability of anyone to take my points. Even people who are supposed to care about their country, even people who claim to be nationalists, they don't seem to understand what I'm saying. Or they are so bent on denying that any changes need to be made at all. So if your moral system is broken down, I would suggest that you need to think of having it replaced, like the boiler I was talking about. But I can't seem to have this conversation, so all the posts are by the freak. Who is Christian from the sound of things. All right. Anyway, I thought I'd post my Telegram group, which I'm developing. But you see, I think if people would just do what they're supposed to do, and what are people supposed to do? They're supposed to accept the truth and act rationally within the reality that they find themselves in. And E. Michael Jones, I don't know, maybe if you do what he does for long enough, without contradiction, when, you only get one kind of people who follow you and who you can't, you won't engage with if you don't, if you don't agree with them. He doesn't agree with me, but he can't deal with any of my points. So he is focused on blaming everything on the Jews. He can't acknowledge points made about Jews not all being of one mind. They are, well, as various as Gentiles are in terms of their views and beliefs. But because E. Michael Jones wants to blame them for everything, he has to claim that they are acting as if they were of one mind, deliberately destroying Western civilization. And I'm saying Western civilization is breaking down because it hasn't got a moral system. And what that means is that its politicians basically do what they like. They don't have they don't feel they have the duty to govern in the national interest. So everything is short term, and because the next election is always less than 4 years ago, they can't plan beyond the next election. And because China can, because it doesn't have elections, it just manages to plan itself, to plan government policy better than Western nations. And Western nations are all submitting to America anyway. So that's really the problem. But I can't seem to get anyone to take my point. They just don't get it. They just have to go on blaming the Jews, as E. Michael Jones does. And before I go, I should talk a little about why he thinks Protestantism is so evil. And what I'm saying about Protestantism is that it's a natural development after European nations, matured into self-confident nations thinking they can, do without the Pope's advice. Because when European nations accepted the tutelage, really, it's really a tutelage of the Catholic Church, they were implicitly admitting their cultural inferiority, because, Rome at the time was the dominant nation. It was the centre of European civilization, and all the other monarchs of the European countries acknowledged that, of course, the Roman Emperor was the, biggest cheese of all, and therefore would be deferred to until they grew up. So when they agreed to the bargain that they made between their monarch and the Catholic Church, they agreed to listen to the Archbishop the cardinal, who was the Vatican's, Governor General, I suppose. Governor General, yeah, that was what he would be. He'd tell the king what to do and advise the king on matters of conscience. And, at the time the king was, well, not very learned. Maybe he couldn't even write. So that was the situation. Until, after many generations, they managed to pick up how to read and write and maybe learn a bit of Latin, maybe learn a bit of Greek. And then they thought, well, we're old enough to think for ourselves now, and we also know that the Pope is only a mortal and fallible man who has political associations and political positions that are not necessarily in the best interests of our European kingdom. And that was, basically the problem. But the bargain was that the Catholic Church would support the divine right to rule of the European monarch in question. And it really is as simple as that. And you can chart for yourselves how well it worked. So it worked until the Holy Roman Empire collapsed, right? It collapsed. After the Wars of the Reformation, when everything had to be rearranged, the English had their own Reformation. It was all a different story for each European nation. But basically they were saying, we're not going to listen to you anymore, Pope, because we don't think you really know what you're on about, and whatever your advice is, it's not necessarily in our best interests. You don't really care about us, and we're not as stupid as our ancestors were. We know how to read and write. We know a little bit about our own history. We know you can't be trusted. And that was basically the reason for the Wars of the Reformation. And so you could call Protestantism an expression of nationalism. And this you can tell by the history of the Church of England and how Henry wanted it to be. So he was very careful to make sure that the words and the rituals were exactly the same, because he knew that he couldn't alienate the people too much. So if he changed anything about their prayer or anything about their ritual, he would be in trouble. And that's why in the Book of Common Prayer you will read the words about blessing the Catholic Church, which he couldn't have meant if he was at war with it. Well, the modern explanation of why this sentence is still in the Book of Common Prayer was that, they were saying it's a universal church. So, it was some convoluted explanation about it being Christendom or something. But really, once upon a time, all Christians were Catholic. Anyway, it's a very murky part of Western history, and I don't think Westerners have examined it properly themselves. I know it's too much of a hot potato. You can understand why Western governments wouldn't want to talk about it, because really, if they started questioning the effectiveness of Christianity, that they would have to, uncomfortable questions would arise, wouldn't they? about whether Christianity is working, and what to do if it isn't, and what about Islam, or, all these questions, and they've basically swept it under the carpet. And so that's why after the American, the French and the Russian revolutions, they still haven't got round to changing their religion. And now they're whinging about, well, the people are whinging about why their government doesn't care about them, and they're starting to blame the Jews again. And the Jews are not really kind of getting it either. Because I say to them, look, you're supposed to be doing something for us. Really you are. That was what you were chosen to do, and you haven't been doing it, and you're basically not wanting to do it now, because if you do it now, people will ask you why you haven't done it before, and awkward questions will start being asked too about the role of Jews. But it's okay. Even the Muslims are, well, they've had a few omissions themselves. So, well, everybody's got their religion a little bit wrong, but the Christians most of all, of course, and that's why Christianity is kaput and has merged with liberalism, which is the problem. Because Christianity, having merged with liberalism, which means nothing more than sexual liberation from the rules of marriage and good parenting, is, what is it? It is a blanket infected with smallpox. It's not going to help you in the long run, because you know what happened to the Native Americans who were given those blankets, don't you? Yes, you do. It would be like eating food that you know is infected by salmonella, or in some way poisoned. That's what it is. And you should be grateful that a ready-made solution already exists, even though you hate it. Now, it's sad that because of the moral corruption of Western men, are not allowed on channels bigger than mine to make this point. That is because they are, well, neurotic, they are afraid, they don't want to be the first one to platform my idea. It's not that I'm demanding that they agree with me. I'm happy to face a panel of inquisitors, but they don't even want to do that, which means they already think I've won the argument. Millennial Woes, Ed Dutton. Anybody interested in the subject would know that secular Quranism is my solution. And to discredit it, they would have to show that there's something better, or show that it cannot possibly work. And the best answer I've had so far, other than we don't like it, you can't make us, we don't wanna, is it's not Western, it's not British, it's not, and it's like, well, was Christianity originally British, or whatever your country is? No, it wasn't. You merely adopted it because it was the best thing going at the time, right? It was the best thing going at the time, and when something better came along, you decided to reject it. And you think that was fine because, well, the Muslims didn't win the war, and the West was more technologically advanced. But there may be a reason why 3 Christian empires were allowed to flourish. And it could be part of the divine plan to make it easier. Once you have an empire, you make it easy to spread ideas within that empire, because you have superior telecommunications, forms, all kinds of communication, transport, everything, and you basically reprogram it, right? You just reprogram the thing, and within the empire, and then it is done. So, in theory, secular Quranism could be discussed, adopted in one country, and then the rest of the West would fall like dominoes and take it up to and including Israel, and this might even make Russia take it up and China take it up, and then we would all be happy bunnies. Now today, somebody arguing with me about secular Quranism on Telegram was saying it's too universalist, and I think he could articulate his objection particularly well, but I think what he meant was that it will mean that we would lose our individuality, and I'm saying not at all. Why would it make you lose your individuality? The United States would be an excellent example. If all the 50 states of America were allowed to interpret the Quran in their own way, do you think they would interpret it in exactly the same way? Would California interpret the Quran in the same way that... Well, put it this way. Would the red states interpret the Quran in the same way as the blue states? And the answer is no. No, it wouldn't. And as I'm sure you will have heard me say many a time, interpretation is not a function of power, is not a function of truth, but that of power. Which means whoever controls the interpretation gets that interpretation. And now, I'll read the chat. But I don't think there's anything. "70 years of being totally wrong eventually causes doubt." I don't know what you're referring to. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. So, I guess I will finish now, because I've just got it off my chest about, people who pretend not to get what I'm trying to say, and it's very frustrating, and it's a sign of infantilization, really, because adult men would face reality and deal with it, while children will just pretend the problem isn't there. It's not their problem. Somebody else's fault. They're not taking responsibility. And E. Michael Jones is perhaps being too pampered by his support, because people don't really care that much about his other ideas. They just know that he's the arch anti-Semite, and that's what they love him for, because there's so many anti-Semites around. So they don't care what he says, really. They just want to support him because they have an idea that he doesn't like Jews. The freak says, no one knows what to believe anymore. Well, I mean, what's a problem? What do you find hard to believe? What do you find hard to believe? You know, I'm still saying that if you think that your sufferings are to do with the fact that your politicians don't care about you, then it must mean that your moral system is broken down, because moral systems have a purpose of keeping a group in existence and apart from others, and they are rule-based. So all these rules are about how we are to treat each other, men and women, how to treat each other, young and old, rich and poor, majority and minority, you know, that sort of thing. So all moral systems have rules, and people accept those rules, or most people accept those rules and obey them, and then you have a functioning moral system. And all these moral systems at least have the goal of supporting marriage and family values. And if you don't do that, then everything will collapse as it has been. And you know you haven't been supporting the institution of marriage for the past 50 years, which is why everything is going to shit. But because you can't reason in the abstract, you know, you will always have to look for people to blame, and these would be people who look different to you, people who are supposed to be different from you, and therefore it has to be Jews or Muslims, but they are only symptoms of your disease, and your disease is that you haven't got you haven't got a functioning immune system, and you know you haven't got it because, you know, whatever that is stupid and crazy that anybody at all wants to do gets in on the nod. Nobody says, no, you can't do that. It's crazy, it's stupid, it's evil, it's mad. Everything, you know, any stupid idea will get done, will be put into practice, won't it? That's how it has been for quite a while now. And you have no means of challenging it or protecting yourselves from these crazy, stupid ideas. It just gets done to you and your society and your offspring and your grandchildren, if you have any, and you can't fight back. Why is that? I'm saying it's moral degeneracy. You can't get it together to even care, let alone do anything. There are no means through which you can organize any resistance, because you are afraid to even formulate arguments against these crazy and stupid proposals. Because those at the top are corrupt, and those at the bottom are also corrupt. So it's a sandwich of corruption, and this means that your moral system has broken down. And if you think your moral system is Christianity, well, the penny should have dropped by now that Christianity is kaput. And can religions collapse? Yes, of course it can. You know it has in the past. People do change their religions. Maybe you should think of it as a new car. You know, it's like Islam is the latest model with the most powerful engine, with a driver's manual. So perhaps if you think in terms of that and work up the courage to discuss it with others in real life, maybe something might change for the better.